Hey, it's Matt from Custom Car Grills with a mesh install video for the 2015 through 17 Acura TLX. In this video, I'll show you how to make the grill shown here, and it all starts with a stock looking grill with that ugly solid beak. Let me clarify for a second, the grill I'm using is not an OEM grill. It's important to note that this is an aftermarket grill that can be found on eBay or Amazon, where the whole grill is all one piece. With that disclaimer out of the way, let's get a Dremel out and equip their number 543 cutting and shaping wheel. And I'll get to work with cutting the center of the grill out from the back. I'm staying about 1/8 of an inch away from the edge, and we'll deal with the edge cutting in a little bit. When it comes time to cut the upper corners, I wasn't able to get all the way through with the angle that I had. Cutting it from the front seemed to work better, but it's also a cut that requires a really steady hand as well as precision in order not to damage the grill frame. After I worked through the front, then I went back to where I was on the other side and made some more cuts to the center of the grill near the edge. These top edge cuts on the back need to go through the center, but not so far that they cut into the outer frame that we want to keep. With all the cuts made, the center section can be lifted out and thrown away. There's a fair bit of cleanup now needed. The cuts I just made were rough and will later allow for a better angle of approach. I need to clear out some of this excess material though, so that the chuck or collet of the cutting device will be able to cut deep enough in the next step. Using the top of the wheel works well for this step. It's highly abrasive and with some patience can slowly shave down extra plastic that I'm trying to trim back. With the frame cleaned up a little bit, I'm going to make a cut along the clear and obvious line between the frame and the old center part that we just threw away. I'm staying very close to the line where those two areas met, but staying ever so slightly behind the edge. This will give me a little room for error and will be easy to clean up later. It's also important to note that I'm making the cut from behind and keeping the cutting angle consistent. When the time comes to get near the upper corners, I'll make one pass shaving down the edge similar to the previous cut. And then I'll change the angle of the cutting wheel to make a perpendicular cut, and this one's very crucial not to go too far. It's generally best to leave a little bit of material and sand it later than to cut too deep and need to repair it. There's probably going to be some burnt on bits from the initial cuts, and making a light pass over the cut edge will help smooth it out and remove some of the burnt bits. Next up, there's a little post on the back that I want to cut out so that it doesn't interfere with the mesh install later. At this point, my lower and side edges are looking really nice, but the top edge is still a little bit off, especially near the outer brackets and in particular with the depth of this area. To solve this problem, I'm going to grab some narrow thin tape and use it as a guide to cut the upper edge a little bit more shallow. This will make the transition to the side a little less harsh and look better. Using tape like this is easy. Just line it up with the depth near the bracket and apply a line towards the center. Then repeat for the other side just like so and we'll be good to go. After that, it's just a simple cut near the back edge where the tape meets the grill. Again, it's usually best to stay a little further back from the tape in an effort not to cut too deep. And just like before, there will be some burnt on bits and need a little bit of cleaning up, which can be taken care of while shaving the plastic closer to the tape line. With the cuts made, the tape line can be removed and thrown away. There's still some remnants of the old grill near this tab, so I'll grab a sanding block and work it down smooth. The grit for the sandpaper doesn't need to be super aggressive, maybe 180 grit, and if you don't have a sanding block, then doing it freeform by hand will also work just fine. If there's any mismatch between where the tape line was and the mounting tab, then just use your cutting wheel to blend the two areas carefully, like what I'm showing here. Next up is just some light sanding on the cut edges to remove any remaining debris and to smooth out the edges a little bit. At this point, the frame is cut, but might be roughed up a little bit from the whole cutting process. This is how my frame looks, and while I'm happy with the cuts, I feel like I need to freshen up the finish with some paint to make it look new again. So first up, I'll grab some primer. I like using the Spray Max 1K self-etch primer filler because it dries fast and even. And then I'll use the Spray Max 1K trim paint in matte black, and this will restore it to the same flat black finish that we started with. We're now ready for the mesh install, and speaking of which, here's the mesh piece that we have for sale on our website. This is made from aluminum and finished in a flat black powder coat with all the right cuts and bends already made. Depending on how accurate your cuts are on the grill frame to what I've shown, there might be some fine tuning needed to adjust the bends, but otherwise this will be good to go out of the box. Okay, let's now get this installed, and I'll start this by placing the grill frame face down. And from there, the mesh piece will drop right into place with the bent tabs facing forward. Then I'll grab some cable ties and foam. The foam is used to protect the finish of the freshly painted frame, while the ties will give me a temporary hold of the mesh to the grill frame. With these ties, simply feed the tail end through a hole in the mesh near the edge, and fasten the tail end through the head of the tie while the head is resting on the back of the mesh. As I work my way around the perimeter of the grill, I'm using a tie about every 4 to 6 inches, and usually only a moderate pressure is being used to fasten them together. It's important to have the tension of the ties strong enough to hold the mesh tight, but not too tight that it distorts the shape of the grill frame. This is a pretty simple step, but it's an important one to get right. Just take your time to make sure everything is lined up properly before moving on. Once I got mine tied down, I came back with some wire cutters and trimmed off the tail ends and threw them away. Before bonding the mesh and frame together, I want to make sure that everything is looking right from the front. On this one, the mesh looks like it's flush up against the edge, and I don't see any frame distortion, so I think I'm good to go. To bond the mesh and frame together, I'm going to go with some Plyo Grip Plastic Repair number 3. But other adhesives such as automotive goop can be used for the job if a fan is blowing on the goop to help it stop from running. The Plyo Grip is a much better bonding solution though, because it's not nearly as runny as the goop is and cures much quicker. When I'm applying this, I'm trying to get the adhesive in and around the mesh while making good contact with the frame and being careful not to spill any through the front. To even out the application, I'm using a small brush to push the Plyo Grip around so that it contacts the most amount of mesh for a good sturdy bond. This stuff cures fairly fast. I've only got a few minutes from the time it's dispensed to work it around before it starts to harden. Some of these spots, especially on the top edge, are a bit tight. If you're using the goop adhesive, you should check out some of the other videos that I have on how to use that glue to make this step easier. After about 30 minutes, the Plyo Grip is hardened and we're ready to see the finished product. I'll cut the ties off and throw them away along with the foam, and our install is now complete. Let's flip this around and see how it turned out. Wow, check this out. This new Beakless design looks so much better than the stock grill. It looks a lot more modern, and we now have a blank slate to work with if logos or emblems want to be added. And here's a render of how the grill will look installed on the vehicle. I'm really digging this design, and I look forward to seeing installed pictures from owners. Well, that's all I got for this video. I hope you liked it, and if you have any questions, please let me know. And thanks for watching.